The Forbidden's whisper. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the spaceship's engine. Outside the window, stars streaked by, their light flashing like distant beacons in the cold vacuum of space. The man, a human named James, stood near the edge of the room, his eyes glued to the control panel in front of him. He was used to the silence of space, but tonight something felt different. There was a weight in the air, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. His breath caught when he heard the soft footsteps behind him. He turned around slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing there, framed by the dim blue light, was the alien woman. Her figure was tall, lithe, and strangely mesmerizing. Her skin shimmered in shades of silver and gold, and her long hair cascaded down her back like strands of liquid light. Her eyes, deep, glowing with a fiery intensity, locked onto his, and for a moment James forgot how to breathe. "James," she whispered, her voice low and husky. It sent a shiver down his spine. "You need to help me." James took a step back, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. His heart was still pounding, but it wasn't just fear anymore. There was something else, something darker, more primal, something that pulled him toward her, even though he knew it was dangerous. She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. "My husband," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion James couldn't place. "He's coming back soon, and I can't wait. I need you now. Please, James, fill me before he arrives." The words hit him like a wave, leaving him speechless. He blinked, trying to process what she had said. His mind raced, but there was no denying the way her eyes burned with desire, the way her voice wrapped around him like a trap he couldn't escape. The temptation was overwhelming now. She was an alien, a creature from another world. He had seen her many times before, during their meetings on the ship, but this was different. There was something in the way she looked at him now, something more than just a passing curiosity or friendship. It was clear that she was asking for something far deeper, something more dangerous. James swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. I don't know what to say," he muttered, feeling a mixture of confusion and heat rise within him. His mind screamed at him to resist, to pull away, but his body was betraying him. His thoughts were clouded, and all he could think about was the alien woman in front of him. "You don't have to say anything," she replied softly, stepping closer until they were just inches apart. Her breath was warm against his skin. "Just listen to what your body wants. Listen to the desire that is burning between us. You can't deny it, James. I can feel it in you, too." James closed his eyes, trying to push the thoughts away. He was a man of reason, a man who had lived his life by the rules, but this was different. This was alien, unfamiliar, and it made his heart race in a way he couldn't explain. He wanted to pull away, but his body refused. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to give in to her. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing lightly across his arm. "I won't force you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable heat. "But I can't stop wanting you, James. I can't stop needing you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. James's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and desire. He wanted to push her away, to remind himself that this was wrong. She was married, and he had no place in her life like this. But the more she spoke, the more he found himself drawn to her, unable to resist the pull. "Please," she breathed, her voice a seductive whisper that seemed to reach into his soul. "Before my husband returns, before everything goes back to what it was. Help me. I need you." James's mind raced. His instincts screamed at him to walk away, but something inside him couldn't ignore the deep longing he felt for her. Her words, her touch, it all felt like a dangerous game, a game that he might not survive if he gave in. But in that moment, as her eyes burned with that fiery desire, he felt as though he was standing on the edge of something impossible to resist. I can't, he whispered, though his voice was filled with uncertainty. This is wrong. The alien woman stepped closer still, her breath coming in soft, quick gasps. Is it James? Is it really? Or are you just afraid of what this could mean for you? James looked down at her, his hands shaking. She was so close now that he could feel the heat of her body against his. His heart pounded, his breath shallow, but all he could do was stare into her eyes, lost in the fire that burned there. And for a moment, he wasn't sure if he was going to step away or fall into her embrace. The alien's Plea James stood frozen, his mind spinning with questions. His eyes were locked on the alien woman before him, her beauty so strange and mesmerizing that it made his pulse quicken. Her silver skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the room, her breath shallow but steady. But it wasn't just her physical beauty. It was the raw, vulnerable emotion in her voice that kept him rooted in place. She stepped back slightly, her fiery gaze softening just a little. It was as if she was giving him space, but the heat between them had not lessened. Her every movement seemed deliberate, calculated, and yet the fear in her eyes, hidden beneath the intensity of her desire, was undeniable. She wasn't just asking for him. She was pleading with him. I never wanted this, she said quietly, almost to herself, but loud enough for James to hear. I never wanted to be in this position, but I have no choice. James swallowed, trying to make sense of her words. What do you mean? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, and for a moment, the silence between them was deafening. She looked away, as though struggling with herself. Her hands clenched at her sides, and James could see the faint trembling in her fingers. The alien woman was no longer the confident, powerful figure he had seen on the ship. Now she seemed small, fragile, even human in her pain. It unsettled him in a way he hadn't expected. My husband, she began, her voice low, full of regret. He is a cruel man. I never loved him, but I had no choice. He promised me power, protection, and the illusion of safety. I thought I could escape him, escape this life, but he found me, always. He will come for me, just like he always does. He has the power to make me do whatever he wants. Her eyes filled with a quiet desperation. And he will punish me when he learns what I've done. James felt a pang of sympathy, though it was quickly drowned by the gnawing tension in his chest. She was begging him, offering herself in exchange for freedom from a marriage that sounded as if it was both a cage and a war. His mind screamed at him to walk away, to not get involved in this mess. But his heart ached for her. And what exactly do you want me to do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, though he already knew the answer. He could feel the pull, the magnetism of her plea, the way her presence seemed to draw him closer. Her eyes locked onto his again, and she stepped forward. Help me, James. Help me escape him. Help me feel something other than fear for once. The life I live, it's not a life at all. It's a constant fight for survival. I want to feel alive. I want to feel something real. The intensity of her gaze left him breathless. The room seemed to shrink around them as she spoke, her words threading into his very soul. How could he say no to someone who was so clearly in pain, someone who had lost everything but her own will to survive? How could he turn his back on her when her plea was wrapped in the rawest form of vulnerability? James opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He was lost, caught between a growing desire and the knowledge that this was all wrong. She was asking him to cross a line, one that he knew he could never uncross. But the promise of something real, something different, was so alluring that he could feel his resolve faltering. The alien woman seemed to sense his hesitation. She took a step closer, her body nearly brushing his. She leaned in, her breath warm against his ear. "I can make you feel things you've never felt before," she whispered. "I can give you everything you've ever wanted. But only if you help me. Only if you take me away from this life of misery and give me something to hold on to." Her words wrapped around him like a physical force, drowning out the voice of reason that had been shouting in his mind. She wasn't just offering herself. She was offering him a chance to escape too. To live without fear, without limitations. She was offering him freedom in a way he never imagined. He closed his eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This wasn't just about desire anymore. This was about making a choice that could change everything. Could he really walk away from this? The alien woman stepped back slightly, her face betraying the smallest hint of uncertainty. She was no longer the predator. She was the prey, lost in a world that didn't care for her. "Please," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't do this alone. I don't want to be trapped anymore." James finally spoke, though his voice cracked under the weight of his own emotions. "I don't know if I can help you," he said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "But I'll try." For a moment, the alien's eyes widened, as if she couldn't quite believe what he had just said. Then, slowly, a soft smile tugged at the corners of her lips, a smile filled with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, James," she said softly, almost reverently. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Temptation and Danger James stood motionless as the weight of his decision pressed down on him. His heart raced, but his thoughts were chaotic, tangled in a web of guilt, desire, and fear. The alien woman, whose name he still didn't know, was so close now that he could feel the warmth of her body against his. Her eyes, once fiery and intense, now held something softer, something vulnerable, but still filled with a burning need. He turned away from her, unable to meet her gaze. It was easier to think, to breathe, when he wasn't staring into the depths of her alien eyes, knowing that the pull was strong enough to unravel everything he had ever known. "I can't just do this," James muttered, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't who I am." The alien woman's voice broke through the silence like a whisper in the wind. "But it is who you are right now, James," she said softly, stepping closer. "Right now, you're just a man standing on the edge of a choice. You can either walk away, or you can let yourself feel something real." Her words were like a promise, a dangerous one. The raw truth of it hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't just a man at this moment. He was a man at the crossroads. And the choice in front of him felt impossible to escape. She reached out and touched his arm lightly, a gentle brush of her fingertips. The soft caress sent a shock of heat through his body, and for the briefest second, his resistance faltered. He felt his body responding to her touch, responding to the intense connection between them. Her voice was now barely a breath, but it was enough to pierce his thoughts. "James ... I want to feel alive again. Not just for me ... but for both of us. I want to escape my past. I want to escape him, but I can't do it alone." The man's pulse quickened. He was beginning to understand her desperation. She was trapped in a life she never chose, and she was asking him to help her break free. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was an escape, a moment of release from a life of fear and control. She wasn't just asking for him to be her lover. She was asking him to be her savior. But before James could process the weight of her request, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the door. Heavy, purposeful steps. His heart froze, his body went tense. The alien woman's eyes snapped wide open with a flash of panic. "He's back," she whispered urgently. "You have to leave, now. He's back." James' mind went into overdrive. He glanced at the door, the sound of the footsteps growing louder with each passing second. There was no time left. "Do you really want to face him?" she asked, her voice shaky. Her body now pressed against his, as if trying to hide her trembling form. "Do you really want to go back to your life? Or do you want something different, something real? For once in your life, James." James hesitated. His mind screamed at him to run, to get out of there before things got worse. But his heart, his body, everything inside him told him to stay, to give in to the temptation that had been growing. Since the moment she walked into the room, he didn't know what to do. The alien woman's touch burned him, and he couldn't ignore the pull. She was offering him something more than just a forbidden moment of passion. She was offering him freedom, both for her and for himself. "He's coming," she urged, her voice low, almost frantic now. "You need to make a choice, James. Now, you can leave and never look back, or you can stay and be a part of something powerful." The footsteps stopped right outside the door, and James could hear the metallic click of a lock being turned. He glanced down at the woman, who was looking up at him with wide, pleading eyes. She was afraid, not just for herself, but for what could happen if her husband returned and found them together. Without thinking, James stepped back, his mind already racing. I need to think. I can't." The door flew open before he could finish his sentence. Standing in the doorway was a figure that froze the blood in James's veins. A tall, imposing alien man, his presence dark and threatening. His eyes glowed with an eerie intensity, and his massive frame seemed to block out all light as he stepped into the room. The alien woman gasped, taking a step back, as if to shield herself from the looming figure. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" The alien man's voice was like a growl, deep and guttural. His eyes flicked over to James, and for a moment they locked. There was no mistaking the menace in his gaze. James didn't know what to do. The situation had escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. He had walked into this room thinking he was simply helping someone escape their past, but now he was standing face to face with a man who looked like he could snap him in half with ease. "Get out," the alien man growled. "You have no place here." James glanced at the alien woman, whose face was now drained of color. She looked at him with a mix of fear and desperation, her eyes silently begging him to leave. But something in James stirred, something he couldn't ignore. The moment had passed, and there was no turning back now. "I'm not going anywhere," James said, his voice surprisingly steady, though his heart was racing. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The alien woman's eyes widened, her fear shifting to something else. Surprise, hope. In that moment, everything changed. The battle for control had begun, and there was no turning back. The husband's return. The alien man's presence was overwhelming. His gaze cut through the room, like a blade, cold and unyielding. The temperature seemed to drop the moment he entered, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though the very air had been sucked from the room. James stood frozen, his pulse pounding in his ears. The alien woman beside him trembled, her posture stiff. As she braced for whatever came next, the man before them was no mere physical threat. His power radiated from him like a force field, and James could feel it pulling at his very core, making his limbs heavy and his thoughts scatter. This wasn't a fight he was prepared for. This wasn't just some heated argument. This was life or death. "You don't belong here," the alien man said, his voice low and filled with venom. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. His eyes flicked between James and the woman, then narrowed, as if realizing something James had not yet understood. The alien woman, still pressed close to James, let out a small gasp. Her body seemed to go rigid, as if she were bracing for impact. Her husband's words had the same effect on her, as they did on James, an oppressive weight, a dark prediction of doom. "I never wanted this," she said quickly, her voice trembling. With fear. "You don't have to do this. He's not my choice. He never was." Her words were met with a low, guttural laugh from the alien man, as though he found her distress amusing. He took a step closer, and James instinctively moved to stand in front of the woman. He could feel his heart thundering in his chest, and every fiber of his being screamed for him to run, to get out while he still had the chance. But his legs refused to move. "I don't care what you want, woman," the alien man growled. "You belong to me. You will always belong to me." James's eyes flicked between the two. The alien woman's expression was full of fear, but there was something else there, too, something that burned brightly beneath the surface. Defiance. She wasn't the helpless victim that her husband thought she was. She had been playing a dangerous game all along, and for the first time, James saw it. Without thinking, he took another step forward, his body moving before his mind could catch up. "You don't own her," James said, his voice steady, but filled with an edge of something he hadn't known he was capable of anger. "No one owns anyone. If she wants out, she should be free to choose." The alien man's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sinister smile. "A human who speaks of freedom," he sneered. "You are all the same. Weak, naive, thinking you can make a difference. But you cannot save her, no matter how hard you try." James's eyes never left the alien's. He could see the smoldering anger in the alien's gaze, the promise of violence lurking just beneath the surface. But the words, the challenge, seemed to strike something in the man. There was a moment, a fleeting instant, when the alien's expression faltered. But it was gone before James could fully register it. The woman beside him spoke again, her voice quieter this time, filled with both fear and a strange sense of resolve. "James ... This is not your fight. Please, just go. Leave before it's too late. I don't want you to die for me." Her words hit him like a slap, and the cold weight of reality pressed down on his chest. He had thought he could save her, that his decision could be the right one. But now, standing face to face with her husband, this brutal, terrifying figure, James realized just how deep the danger ran. The alien man's laugh echoed through the room, a low, menacing sound. "Die for you?" he repeated mockingly. "This human thinks he can save you? There is no escape for you, woman. There never was. You are mine. And you," he said, turning his gaze back to James, "are nothing but a fool." The room grew colder, and James felt a sharp chill crawl up his spine. But his feet remained planted, unmoving. He couldn't look away from the alien man, couldn't give him the satisfaction of retreating. His mind spun with the reality of the situation. He wasn't in control here. The power imbalance between them was like a tidal wave, and he was a mere human standing against it. But then the alien woman spoke again, her voice soft, filled with a quiet strength that shocked James. "Stop," she said. "I won't be your prisoner anymore. I will not be bound by you. I am not yours to control." The alien man faltered, just for a moment. His expression twisted, a mix of confusion and anger. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to stand up to him. "You will regret this," he snarled, but there was hesitation in his voice, now something that hadn't been there before. James could see it now. The woman had power, but it wasn't just the kind that came from strength or physical force. It was something deeper, something that went beyond the alien blood running through her veins. She had the power of choice, of will, and that made her dangerous. And it was that power, the very thing her husband feared, that had drawn James into this world of uncertainty. For a moment, The alien man looked as though he might attack. His eyes blazed with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. But then, something in the alien woman's gaze, something resolute, made him stop. He glared at them both one last time, as if weighing his options. "You think you can escape me?" He spat. "You are wrong." And with that, he turned, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent room as he stormed out, leaving James and the alien woman standing there, the weight of what had just transpired settling heavily around them. For a brief moment, no one spoke. But the silence was filled with 1,000 unspoken thoughts, 1,000 unmade decisions. And in the air between them, the tension hung like a storm, waiting to break. Asterisk, a dangerous choice. The room was eerily silent after the alien man's departure. The soft hum of the spaceship's engine was the only sound that filled the air now. James and the alien woman stood in the same spot, the distance between them having grown shorter in the wake of their shared confrontation. The tension still hung heavily, like a thick fog, but now there was a certain weight to it, a fragile kind of relief that they were both still alive. James was the first to break the silence. You just stood up to him," he said, his voice low, as if he were still trying to process the intensity of what had just occurred. "You defied him." The alien woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a few steps back, her face unreadable as she glanced toward the door where her husband had stormed out just moments before. Her eyes were dark, but there was a flicker of something James couldn't quite place shimmering beneath the surface. "I had to," she said finally, her voice quieter now, almost as if speaking the words out loud was a form of release. "I've lived under his control for so long. But the moment I saw you, I knew I had a choice. And for the first time in my life, I'm choosing freedom." James could hear the pain in her voice, and it struck him more deeply than he anticipated. This was more than just a woman asking for help. This was a plea from someone who had been trapped, who had fought for years to find a way out. And now she was standing on the precipice of making that escape, no matter the cost. He met her gaze, his chest tightening as he realized the depth of what she was asking. "And what happens now? What do we do?" he asked, his voice betraying the uncertainty he felt inside. Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she almost looked human, vulnerable, unsure, like someone who is unsure of how to take the first step toward a new life. Now we make a choice," she said, her voice more steady, more confident. "We either run or we fight. But there's no turning back, not now." James felt a chill run down his spine. The decision was so much bigger than he had imagined. They weren't just two people trapped in a bad situation. They were about to fight an entire system, an empire that had been built on control and fear. The stakes were unimaginable. If they left now, if they escaped, they would be hunted by enemies, far stronger and far more dangerous than either of them. But even in the face of this fear, something within him began to shift. He thought about how he had always played it safe, how his life had been about staying within the lines. But with this alien woman standing before him, with the fire in her eyes and the courage in her heart, he realized something. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows. Maybe it was time to make a choice that wasn't based on fear. "I'm with you," James said, his voice steady now, stronger than it had been before. "I don't know what this will look like, but I'll help you. Fight. I'll help you run. Whatever you need." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but there was no mistaking the gratitude in her expression. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, a soft gesture that was filled with more emotion than words could express. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with a quiet sincerity. "You don't know what this means to me. To have someone who believes in me, believes in us." James nodded, though his mind was already racing with the possibilities of what would come next. Escape was no longer a fantasy. It was their reality. They had to leave this ship, leave this life behind, and find a way to survive in a galaxy. That was not kind to those who ran, but as the weight of their decisions settled on him, James couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something far worse than they had prepared for. The alien man wouldn't just let them walk away. His rage had been palpable, and he would stop at nothing to track them down. "We need to move quickly," James said, his voice urgent now. "We can't stay here. We need to find a way off this ship. The longer we wait, the more time he has to come after us." The alien woman nodded, her expression turning serious. "You're right. He'll come back. He'll bring reinforcements. If we're going to escape, we need to do it now. But we won't make it far without a plan." James felt the reality of it all hit him like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her and for the future they could have if they managed to escape. He took a deep breath and turned toward the control panel, his mind already working out a strategy. "We can try the escape pods," he said, his eyes scanning the panel. "They'll be our best bet for getting off this ship unnoticed. But we have to move fast. We can't afford to be caught." The alien woman moved beside him, her eyes now scanning the same display. "We need to disable the ship's tracking systems," she said quickly. "If they know where we're going, they'll catch us before we even leave the atmosphere." James nodded. "All right, we'll need to access the main security systems. I can hack into the control panel, but it's going to take some time. We'll need to cover our tracks as much as possible. If we're lucky, we'll get a head start before they realize we're gone." He turned back to her, meeting her gaze once again. This was it, the point of no return. The alien woman had chosen her freedom, and now so had he. There was no turning back. The escape, the fight, it had already begun. With a deep breath, he keyed in the commands, his fingers moving swiftly across the panel as he began the process of overriding the ship's systems. The countdown had begun. There was no time to waste. The final temptation. The quiet hum of the spaceship's engines reverberated through the walls, a constant reminder that time was running out. James' fingers flew across the control panel, his mind racing. The escape pods were their only chance. Now, but the more he worked, the more the reality of the situation hit him. There was no going back. They were about to turn their lives upside down, and the consequences could be deadly. As the alien woman stood beside him, her presence was a quiet force, calm and determined, yet filled with an unspoken anxiety. He could see the way her eyes darted to the door every few seconds, as though expecting it to burst open at any moment with her husband and his men charging in. The fear was clear, but so was the resolute strength behind her. She was a woman, on the brink of freedom, and nothing was going to stop her now. "Are you sure about this?" James asked, glancing up from the panel. His voice was low, and the question seemed almost absurd in the silence of the moment. There was no turning back now, but it still felt necessary to ask. She nodded without hesitation, her gaze never leaving the door. "I've spent too long living in fear. This is my chance. It's our chance." There was no mistaking the fire in her words. The alien woman wasn't just running. She was seizing control of her own fate, and she wasn't afraid to burn bridges in the process. "I never thought I'd be in this situation," James admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "A few hours ago, I was just a guy trying to keep to himself. But now I'm fighting for both of us. I don't even know what's waiting for us out there." "We'll make it work," she said, her voice steady, but there was something in her eyes, an understanding, a recognition that they were both standing on the edge of something unpredictable. "You don't have to have all the answers, James. We just have to move. We have to run. A sudden shudder ran through the ship, the lights flickering briefly. James' hand froze on the control panel. His heart raced. The sensation was unmistakable. Us. Shift in the atmosphere. A heavy weight settling in the air. The ship was on high alert. They've detected us, James muttered, his voice tight with urgency. They know we're trying to leave. The alien woman's expression didn't change, but her eyes grew sharper. Then we have no more time. Just as she spoke, the lights above them flickered again. The ship's security systems were being activated. James' mind raced, but he kept his focus. With a quick glance, he accessed the escape pod controls, bringing up a map of the ship's layout. The escape pods were in the lower decks, but they would have to go through the maintenance hallways to avoid the primary security checkpoints. It wouldn't be easy, and every minute they spent on the ship put them at greater risk of being caught. We'll go through the maintenance tunnels, James said quickly. But we have to be fast. We're not alone in here anymore. As he finished speaking, the doors to the room slid open with a soft hiss. James' body tensed, every muscle in his frame ready to spring into action. But it wasn't her husband this time. A squad of heavily armed guards filed into the room, their footsteps heavy and synchronized. Their faces were covered by black. Helmets and their weapons gleamed in the dim light. The same men who served her husband. And they had found them. The alien woman's hand was already at her side, her fingers brushing against the small, concealed weapon she had smuggled on board. But she didn't draw it, not yet. She didn't want to start a fight unless there was no other option. Not until the very last moment, James felt the air thicken with tension. He could sense the alien woman's fear, but there was something else, too. Something darker, stronger. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was a fight for freedom, and every choice they made from this point on would determine who they were going to become. The guards didn't speak at first. Their presence alone a heavy weight in the room. One of them stepped forward, his rifle aimed directly at James, his voice mechanical. "Cold, you're coming with us?" he said flatly. "The ship's security systems have locked down the escape routes. You're not going anywhere." James' heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if he had the strength to fight them all off. He certainly didn't have the weapons or the training. But he was certain of one thing. He wasn't going to just surrender. Not now. The alien woman, without missing a beat, took a step forward, her stance confident despite the growing tension. "You don't understand," she said, her voice carrying a certain quiet power. "I am not your prisoner anymore. You can try to stop me, but you will not win." James could see the shift in the air, as if her words had cracked open something in the room, something that had been waiting to be unleashed. Her defiance, her refusal to be controlled, had ignited something within him as well. He wasn't just fighting to help her escape anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger. In that moment, the first guard lunged toward them, his rifle raised, but the alien woman was faster. She drew her concealed weapon in a blur of motion, taking the guard down before he could even react. The second guard fired his weapon, but James was already on the move, grabbing a piece of metal from the control panel and swinging it at the man's rifle. The shot went wild, and the guard stumbled back in surprise. It wasn't a perfect fight. There was chaos, fear, and confusion. But the one thing James could feel was the fire in his chest, the fire that matched the alien woman's. This was their moment. Get to the maintenance hallways. The alien woman shouted over the chaos. Now, with the guards momentarily disoriented, they dashed toward the exit. James' heart was racing, but his body was moving on instinct. Every step he took felt like a final push toward something they couldn't go back from. As they made their way down the dark hallways, the sound of the guards' footsteps chasing them grew louder. The pursuit had begun. They were running for their lives now, and there was no turning back. The alien woman glanced over at James, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. "We're almost there," she said, her voice breathless. "We'll make it, I promise." And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, James allowed himself to believe her. Asterisk.